interesting is, most people who want to learn how to work remotely better, they will approach me asking me for tips around communication or tools or time zones. And they tend to focus a lot on that. Very, very few people actually ask me questions about culture unless they're already, set up on the tools. But I really think we should start looking at culture first as the foundation of how our team is going to collaborate and behave and treat each other. For those people out there who are trying remote work for the first time now, I want to reassure you that under different, let's say, normal circumstances, it's not this intense, and it doesn't, always have your kids and everything happening at the same time, staying at home. So just wanted to point that out. I personally love working from home, and I wouldn't go back to an office. I started working from home. Sorry for the pixelated images. Sometimes my connection is a bit slow, but they'll become sharp. There we go. So I started working remotely, like I said, in 2014. I joined a company called Hano. They're still around, and they're a small UX design team, actually. So I joined as a UX designer, and I was writing a thesis back then, which you can see here, on remote design thinking. I published it on Medium. In case you're interested, you can check it out. It's quite long though. But essentially what I wanted to do was to be able to work from anywhere that I wanted. So back then I was based in the UK, but my entire team was spread across the world. So I had one teammate in London, the same city as me, and we had the rest of the team spread across Eastern Asia, the Southeast, and Europe, Central Europe mainly. So we worked across different time zones, and we were 8 people, sometimes we were 9, sometimes we were 7, but we were pretty much a small team. And I learned a lot from them. They had a lot of processes, and it was easy being a small team to be consistent with the way we were working together remotely. So we really said, the internet is our home. And of course we had a ton of tools that we were using to collaborate together, to communicate. These, I would say, were the main tools that we're using. Back then, I guess Zoom wasn't as popular as it is now. A lot of our clients were still using Skype, or they were looking at other options. But we started using Zoom pretty early on, and we had a set of tools to document things and to also collaborate visually. So that's what we used Mural for. So Mural was one of the main tools that we used, and then I eventually joined Mural because I was such a big fan. And Mural is a much bigger company. So today we're actually 159 people. So we keep adding people to our team. We have 2 offices, one in San Francisco, one in Buenos Aires, and then we have more and more people joining remotely from different places in the US and also in Europe. So in Europe, I think today we're about 9 people. So we have even though we're not fully distributed as a company, we definitely have offices. We're more of a hybrid team, and it has been around for 7 years. It started in Buenos Aires, but we have a remote first approach to the way that we work. And so I'm just going to fast forward to early 2020, and I wanted to show you a bit the trends in Google. When you search for the word remote work, it's the blue line. You can see that's been steadily increasing over the years anyway. But if we look at working from home in the past, since 2015, there's been some spikes, but obviously here at the end, that's massively increased due to the current situation, which has forced so many people, or everybody, to stay home unless you're an essential worker who has to go to a hospital or a supermarket or something. So even though our company is remote first, we also, faced with figuring out how do we work remotely when we're all remote. Even our office is not existent at the moment. So this is just a snapshot from our Slack channel, and this is Megan, one of our designers. She was asking everybody in the team to share their work from home best practices, especially because she was one of the people who went to the office but there were tons of us who already had experience, like myself. So she got tons of replies. Actually, this was quite a while ago. And since then, we keep sharing our best practices internally, and I want to share some of those things with you as well. So I will start with some tips for remote work, and then later I will share some tips for yourself personally on a personal level. So when it comes to you and your team, I tend to divide the tips into 3 categories. I call them the 3 C's, and they are culture, communication, and collaboration. And I use this as well when I give workshops to clients, because sometimes I still freelance for other companies, and I help them to become a more efficient remote team. These are the 3, let's say, areas of impact that I really focus on. So the first one is culture. And what's interesting is, most people who want to learn how to work remotely better, they will approach me asking me for tips around communication or tools or time zones. And they tend to focus a lot on that. Very, very few people actually ask me questions about culture unless they're already set up on the tools. But I really think we should start looking at culture first as the foundation of how our team is going to collaborate and behave and treat each other. So I would say you could dive into culture a lot, but what I want you to really maybe take away from this is that, especially when you're working remotely with your colleagues, you want to have trust. And if you don't have trust, that's kind of the blocker for any kind of efficient distributed working to happen. So trust is an essential part, especially on the side of managers and the leadership team, so that you can get your work done in a way that you feel comfortable. Because if you don't have that trust, they're going to tend to micromanage, and I'm sure people are doing that now because they're just not used to it. And I will share some examples of this as well. Second one is transparency. So when you are so separate physically, it's really important to have a culture of transparency. Share what you're doing, share what you're working on. And this isn't because you want to show your manager, hey, I'm on top of everything, but it's really to give a sense of to people, everybody else on your team, hey, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm stuck on, this is where I need help. If you're not communicating those things, if you're not being transparent, it's not going to feel like you're a connected team. And then for rituals, I'm going to share a few things there as well, but there's definitely rituals you can set in place for your team to feel more connected. So an example of trust, and I would say also transparency, the image will appear in a second, but this is a message that our CEO at Mural sent us. It was pretty early in the morning for him. He's based in San Francisco. And what he did is he recorded a video of himself. So the bigger screenshot you see is a video. You can see in the lower left-hand corner, it's him there. And he was sharing a video and sharing his screen of what he thinks is happening right now, and how it's going to impact our company, how it's going to impact our customers, how the leadership team feels about it. So he told us, this is a really important message, and I want you guys to have a look at it and tell me what you think. And I think in that sense, our leadership team is very is trying to be very present, even though they're super busy, of course, but they are trying to build that trust and share with us what's on their mind, what's happening to the company, how is this going to impact the employees. We're not trying to hide even like the ugly truths if something is going to impact us in a negative way. And by doing so, of course, they are building trust, but they're also being they're being transparent. Another way for us to be transparent in our team, for example, we have a channel where we share our mistakes. So it's a channel on Slack called Don't Do This. And so we have people sharing, this is a mistake I did. I told the client we should do this and that, but actually I shouldn't have said this. And by being very open about our mistakes, we're also teaching others and helping them to learn from what we did. And then for rituals, we have a few rituals. I'm going to share 2 of them. Rituals are really important for people to connect. One of these that we have is a way of celebrating other people based on the values that we have. So what you see on the left here are the values at Mural that we have iterated on, and we continue, to evolve them. And every time we want to give somebody a kudos or say thank you to somebody, we mention one of the values as well. So in the first one, you can see Stefan is thanking somebody called Federico, and at the end, you know, he uses the hashtag. The person is helping to make others successful, which is one of our values. And the same with Bethan at the bottom. She's thanking Irene, who was a new hire, and we hired her actually the week that we started the lockdown. So she was thanking her for being such a great person who adapts to thrive. So that's a little ongoing ritual that we have, and I think it's really important as a team to set up these kind of events to make people feel connected. You can do that in an asynchronous way, meaning that you do it in you're not expecting people to respond to you in real time, but you can also be more intentional about it and do it synchronously. So we have an all hands company meeting every 2 weeks. Well, now it's with 159 people. This is just a screenshot of some of them, but we get the whole company with their webcams on, and we have usually the leadership people sharing some updates. We invite other people from the company to share any stories that they want to share. Sometimes we invite customers to share use cases of how Mural has helped them improve the way that they work. So this is something that can really be used to engage with people, and also makes you realize, wow, we are so many people at this company. It's hard to see that if people don't all put their webcams on, if we're not doing this regularly. Otherwise, you tend to work in your silo. So I mentioned there were 3 C's. The second C I wanted to come to is communication. So if you are working remotely, there's a couple of things I really recommend. The first is to agree on how you will communicate. And once you have those agreements, you stick to those agreements. And it's really important that everybody sticks to them, and then you can try them out. And if something doesn't work, then you can change them. But at least, have some kind of agreement. Once you have those agreements, do document them, but not just the agreements, but also document a lot of processes, document your action items after a meeting and follow up with them. Decide on where you will share this documentation. Are you going to have everything in a Google Drive? Are you going to share things in a project management tool like Trello or Asana or something like that? And you will most probably realize that you will use different platforms for different kinds of communication and different documentation. So you may agree that Slack is only used for urgent communication. Email, you're only going to use it with your clients, but internally you're not going to use email. That's our case, for example. And anything that is project related, you might keep it in Trello. And then over communication is something that we hear a lot when it comes to remote teams. Many times people refer to it as communicating the same thing again and again, which can become a little bit annoying. But more than anything, I think it means, for me at least, to make sure that whatever you are communicating not only appears in different channels, so that you're making sure that everybody sees it, because not everybody might use the same channels in the same way if you don't stick to your agreements, but also to communicate everything that you're doing also outside of work. So, yes, you are an employee or maybe a contractor or something for a company, but if we're only going to talk about work the whole time, and you're not going to bring a little bit of your human side to work, it's going to get really boring. So I really recommend people to also communicate. If you're going offline, then maybe mention why you're going offline. You can say, I have to pick up my kid, or I have a doctor's appointment, or you can come back from lunch and communicate that you had an amazing lunch, and maybe share a photograph of what you had for lunch. There's lots of things that you can communicate. After a weekend, you can say, oh my God, I had the best birthday party, or whatever it was that you did. And it really helps to connect with people also on things that are not related to work. So the key to all this, as you've seen underneath all this, is consistency. If everybody agrees to stick to the way that you've formulated, you will communicate. And if everybody continues to document things in a consistent way, and if everybody over communicates what they're doing also in their personal lives and uses all the channels, then your communication is probably going to be off to a good start. And I'll give you an example of what an agreement could look like. And there's many, many ways of doing this. This is just one example. There is a framework that I really like called the Team Canvas. It's Team Canvas, the teamcanvas.com. And they have this framework that you can use that is very similar to a business model canvas, but what it's done, it's made for a new team or even an already existing team to align on how they will work together and how they will communicate and what their roles will be. So it does take some time to complete. I recommend to do this at the same time, in real time. And so this, for example, I used it with my team when I first created the people operations team. We were only 3, now we're 7. So it's changed since then. But we, on the left-hand side, we talked about our roles and what we're going to do. What are the common goals we have? What are some personal ones? And so forth. So we really filled out the canvas. The values, these were not for the company, but these were the values specific to our team. We also had a purpose, like what is the mission of our team? And what I really enjoyed doing also was sharing the strengths and the weaknesses that we each have on a personal level. But what this all did, especially in this place here, the rules of the activities, it showed what kind of guidelines, what rules are we sticking to communicate better, and what are our agreements. So I'm going to share that. Actually, I'm going to zoom into that in a second. I want to come to the third C, which is around collaboration. So as I mentioned earlier, when people ask me how they can improve the way they work, they often come to me asking about tools, or how do I manage time zones? What tools do I need? And what people don't realize is that it's not only about the tools. I mean, like I mentioned earlier, I could use Zoom, but in the past I used Skype. Some people use Google Hangouts. Some people use Whereby. It doesn't always matter what tool you use. Of course, some tools are more efficient than others. Like when I hear that, companies are using WhatsApp rather than Slack, I feel really sorry for them, because WhatsApp is really too simple for a big team. But what's really important is what processes, how are you going to use this tool? It doesn't matter if you're using Skype or Zoom, but like what agreements do you have when it comes to that? Actually, yeah, I'll just zoom into that right now. When I showed you the team canvas earlier, I showed you some rules we did. So these were our processes and the tools that we were going to use in order to communicate every week or monthly. So what you see in orange are the different kind of touch points that we had in our team. So we would have daily check-ins to communicate. And then I would say how was the tool. So we would use Geekbot, which was a plugin, like an integration on Slack. What's very important is also why are we even checking in? Why does this matter? So for me, it mattered that every day my team would use this bot to communicate with me in written form, to share how they're feeling and to share what they're working on today. So that way, even if we're 6 hours apart, I know what they're doing. And who would be involved in this? It would be the whole people operations team. So again, you can go through all of these and see that I made these kind of rules together with my team. It wasn't just me who did them. So some other things would only happen maybe once a quarter, like a performance review. We would use Bamboo, which is an HR tool, and we would use Zoom to make sure that we'd have this face-to-face. Why we did it was because we wanted to get feedback, and who would be involved. It was always 2 people together. So it's usually me as their manager and somebody on my team. So this is actually a great way to visualize all your processes. And then once you have them documented, you might realize this is too much. But this is also super helpful when you are onboarding a new person, to show them this is how we work. Also, when it comes to collaboration, what's really important to keep in mind is to have empathy for your teammates. People are working in different contexts and situations. Even before COVID-19, obviously this has now intensified everything, but we had people working in different time zones. So maybe when it's morning for my boss, it's going to be evening for me. So it helps for me to realize that his brain, hasn't fully woken up yet. And he knows that I'm wrapping up the day and I might be a little bit tired. So we definitely have empathy for each other in that way. Or you might just, try to understand how people are feeling on a regular basis and checking in on them. And it's really important to add that human element, I think. Even starting a meeting by doing a quick round of check-in questions, like what's on your mind today, or how was your weekend, or things like that, to make people connect in that way. And then the last thing I would just mention for all of you, especially who are new to working from home, is that this is an experiment. Currently, it's an experiment for every company in the world. But even when you are working remotely since many years, as your team scales, everything has to change and update itself, you know? So even when I was at Hanno, we were constantly experimenting things. And if things don't work, that's okay. You can still change them. So I would really treat remote work in that way, because if you start getting upset at things that haven't worked out, or you just say, okay, you know, this didn't work, so we're never going to work remotely again, that's really a shame, because there's always a way to find a solution to things that haven't worked out for you and your team. And then I want you to talk about the 4 S's. I did the 3 C's: culture, communication, collaboration. Those were really related to the work and the company and the team that you work with. And these are more personal things. So I would just summarize this. When you are working from home, you want to pay attention to the space or the environment that you're working in. You know, figure out what works for you. I, for example, need a lot of natural sunlight to feel comfortable. I love quiet spaces, so I'm not really good. I'm not very comfortable working from a cafe or in a co-working space. So all these things are personal needs that I have, and I try to set them up in a way that suits me. And it does make a difference once you have your home office. I also have lots of ergonomic things. So I have an ergonomic mouse, I have an ergonomic mouse pad, I have a stand-up, not a stand-up desk, but a standing thing for my laptop, so that it's at the right eye level. And because I travel a lot and I work maybe from an Airbnb, I take these things with me all the time. So I have also like a backpack to bring my space and transport it somewhere else. I also really pay attention to my schedule. So that's something that a lot of people do also at Mural, is to really block out time. So this is a screenshot of my colleague, Mary. She is in Denver in Colorado, and she always blocks out her time for lunch, and she shows us on her calendar that she's out for lunch. So I know that I shouldn't have a meeting with her at that time. I really recommend people to also leave a buffer, maybe of 5 or 10 minutes between one meeting and the next. It's very, very easy to schedule meeting after meeting after meeting, and then next thing you know, you're online on Zoom for 4 hours or 6 hours. That's happened to me before, and you barely have time to get up and go to the bathroom. So really, you know, think of your calendar as something that you can control. You have the power to manage your own schedule. If you use something like Calendly to ask people to book a call with you, you have a lot of settings there, so you can really decide if you want people to only schedule a time with you in the morning or the afternoon. And especially when you know that you work across different time zones, you want to build your day like that. So my mornings are free, and then my afternoons are for meetings. Self-care, that really depends on what matters to you, whether it's working out physically, going to the gym, going for a walk, taking a break and calling a friend. Make time for those things as well in your schedule. And then socialize. Of course, now it's a little bit more difficult, but it's really important to do that, because one of the biggest challenges people face when they work remotely is isolation. So if you ask remote workers who have been remote for a long time, quite a few years, they'll tell you that's usually the biggest challenge, is the sense of isolation and the lack of human connection. So that's something that, again, you have to be proactive about, and make time to see people, to leave your home or to leave your co-working space and meet other people. And yeah, finally, just wanted to share some of my biggest learnings that I've had, especially in the past year or so with Mural, because it's a much bigger company than where I used to be. I've learned that, you know, I need to step up to be in a role, even if I'm new in a role, to be in another role and take initiative. And maybe people haven't asked me yet whether I should do that or not. You can just take initiative and step up and do something, you know, especially when you're in different time zones. You can't wait 6 hours until your manager comes and agrees and lets you do something that you want to do. So I work in a startup environment, so it's a bit different. I know if you're in a more corporate environment, it's maybe harder to take that initiative without approval. with that comes the fact that being resourceful and searching for things and being autonomous is very, very helpful. You can't always depend on people when they're not responding on Slack when you want them to. So learning how to find your own answers. It is often chaotic to work remotely, especially if you're not used to it. So at the end of the day, if you just embrace it and accept it and go with the flow and see what you can improve and not get too frustrated by things that don't work, you'll see that it will get easier with time. And then there's an expression in English, kill your darlings, which I like a lot, which is basically sometimes we're very attached to an idea and, you know, we absolutely want to stick to that idea. We want to do it, but sometimes it's not worth it. Like you've tried it, it hasn't worked out. So it's really important to know how to let go and kill your darlings. And being vulnerable, this is especially for, I think, people in a management role, but not only. I think just being open about how you're feeling, if you're feeling tired, if you're feeling sad, if you were like that and you would step into an office space, your teammates would probably be able to notice and they would ask you, hey, what's up? What's going on? You know, how can I help you? But when you are remote, it's much harder to share that you're not feeling great. And so nobody will notice unless you mention that. So there are ways, like I mentioned before, you can have little check-ins and rituals to find out how people are feeling, but it's also you, and especially as a manager, to act as a role model and say, yeah, I had a terribly, terribly crappy day yesterday, and you know, show that human side of yourself. And then most importantly, take time off, not just from the screen, but also in general, take longer breaks, take a holiday. If you're working from home all the time, you can kind of get sucked into this vortex and then kind of like never realize you have to leave. Statistically, it's proven that people that work from home actually work much more intensely than people who work from an office because they have less distractions, even though a lot of managers think it's the opposite, that you'll be more distracted by staying home, but actually it's been proven that it's quite the opposite. So, you know, please, yeah, take care of yourself and take a break. And then lastly, if your company is going to decide to transition to remote work later, or you decide that you want to be fully remote after COVID-19, just remember that it takes time for changes to happen. And when you have a lot of things happening at the same time, you feel like you can't, you know, be a firefighter and you have so many fires to take out. So sometimes you just gotta let some fires burn and realize that change is the change will come, but you know, it's at its own pace depending on where you are at in your work and in your personal life. So I will wrap it up there, and I guess see if there's any Q&As. Oh, before the Q&As, I just want to say, if you do want to find some more information that might be helpful for you, we did launch a website called suddenlyremote.co, where we have a lot of resources that can help anybody who's been launched into remote work for the first time. And then if you want to keep in touch with me, you have my website there, it's lailavon.com, and my Twitter handle, and you can find me on LinkedIn as well. But I will stop sharing now and come back to the Q&A. There we go. So I see, Michael, you're still there. So if anybody wants to ask any questions, I really recommend you to turn on your webcam so we can be a group of people here, as if I was at the real meetup in Vienna, which is where it was supposed to happen originally. I see Adam is here. Hi, Adam. And yeah, I don't know if there's been any questions shared. Oh yeah, Gregor asked in the chat, am I going to share this after the session? Yeah, I can share the link to the mural that I just used for my presentation. Happy to share it with anybody.
May I jump in?
Yeah, sure.
Hi everyone, I'm Bruno. I'm based here in Brussels, Belgium. Thanks very much, Laila. That was a great presentation. I guess my question is about how do you have tips or experience in getting teams that are originally not remote take up the habit of thinking about their agreements, around how to communicate and what tools to use and so on, and taking the habit of having a regular discussion every 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, something like that. How do you press on them the importance of doing that maintenance? Thanks.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. I think like anything, it requires a bit of discipline as well. I think 4 weeks would be way too long to wait to iterate. So let's say you have a team that wants to go remote, and stick to it. What I would recommend is really first you have a conversation with the whole team or the whole company, depending on who's going remote. Sometimes there's just one team that's remote and not the whole company, right? So talk to the people who will be affected and get their understanding of what they're concerned about, why they would like to do it, or why some people don't want to work outside of the office.
I mean, I guess perhaps I can just specify that it's under COVID-19 circumstances.
Oh, okay, so great.
No one has a choice.
Right. So yeah, so I think there's a few people who might be able to be, how can I say, the advocates for the team or for the company. So find those people, identify them. Usually it's easy because it's the people who are really excited about working from home, and they're like, finally we can get this happening, and get them to have regular meetups. Maybe they can send a survey once in a while to the company to find out how it's going, and having like a town hall conversation as well, and making like open attendance. Whoever wants to join the conversation can join. You can do that maybe like once a month or once every 2 weeks. But then the really important part, I think, is the agreements. Like I said, you have those agreements, you document them, you share them with the rest of the team of the company. You see what works, what doesn't work. You also assign somebody to be kind of like a bad cop. So that's me at Mural. For some things, like today I asked everybody, please change your Slack photograph to a real human face. Like, I don't want any Daffy Duck. I don't want the avatars. I want people to know who they are. We have a lot of new hires, and so then it becomes a bit hard. So, I say if I see that you're not, doing this, I'll check in with you either individually, or I'll put a little like policewoman emoji when I see people like not following guidelines. So sometimes, people don't respond in threads, or people are talking or using the @channel thing in Slack when they shouldn't be using it. So you can identify a police person, and make it fun as well, but and then you can review it. I can think of like the retrospective framework, if you're familiar with that in agile teams. Yeah, what worked, what didn't work, what can we do better? I would say do that maybe once a week, and you can make it short. It can be like a 30-minute meeting. Make sure you have like a follow-up later and communicate to the rest of the company, this is what didn't work, here's what we need to improve next week, and just document it, make sure people can find it very easily. You're welcome. Any other questions?
Yes, I would have a short question. You say you work remote full time. How often do you still physically meet with people from your company then? Because you said as well you travel a lot, so I assume it's not 100% remote after all.
Yeah, it's so I travel for personal purposes mainly. Occasionally I have to go to a conference or something like that, but I prefer doing my meetups online as well. So I meet. So the whole company at Mural, we try to have a company retreat once a year. So that's, we had one in December. It was 120 people in Argentina for a week. And I organized it with my team. It was a lot of logistics. Otherwise, you can do like smaller team offsites. So for example, the customer experience team might meet like twice or 3 times a year, and they'll pick a destination. So if you look even at companies like Buffer, they have a great blog where they talk about their retreats and how they organize them and what do they do during these offsites. You can really break it down. I think that a small team could maybe meet 2 to 3 to maybe 4 times a year. The whole company, I think once a year is enough. Even if it's like at Hanno, we were 8 people and we met once a year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I just have more like a remark to your point with the overcommunication, because that's indeed, let's say, for a lot of people seen even as an issue to say, like, I get too many information there. So I think a way to deal with that might be to really actively asking for acknowledgement of communication. So because we know communication is not a one-way street, so to really like check in with the person if they acknowledge what was communicated. So I think that's a way to be more effective also with communication.
Yes, yeah, and sometimes we don't always have to say, yes, I've read what you posted, but that's why, you know, we have all those little thumbs up things in places. It's not just to like what people write, but it's to show them, yes, I've acknowledged what you've written, and I've taken note of it.
Yes, indeed, indeed.
Definitely.
Like as you said, make the process also really like agree on how you do this acknowledgement. Maybe it's in a also like in a session like here to just say like, okay, thumbs up if you got it. So that's little things that will help the communication, and also gives what I sometimes find difficult. You are the one talking and you don't know, are the people still with you, especially the bigger the group is getting. So how do you get a feedback to say like, yes, they are all still there, or they get the point?
That's a really good point. And I think a lot of meetings, unfortunately, when people are not used to remote work, a lot of meetings tend to be like webinars, where it's one person speaking. So it's a monologue, and then nobody interrupts. Everybody's on mute, which is a good practice, but then it feels like, well, nobody's going to talk. I don't even know if people are still listening to me or not. So I really try to enforce facilitation, or encourage. Enforce is maybe not the right word. Encourage facilitation as a skill for everyone to have. And by facilitation, I mean you select somebody who's going to guide the conversation, but they're not going to monopolize the conversation. So they're saying, okay, this is the agenda. This is what we're going to talk about. This is what we're going to do. And then time boxing the activities so that you say, okay, we have 5 minutes to do this. That's going to make people super engaged, because you know that there's like a time limit, and that then we're going to have to share some outcomes or something. So you can see whether people are still with you or not when you have a lot of people on the call. For sure. Any other questions?
So what I would be interested in, you referred to tons of tools and learning being a constant process, etc. So for those teams or people who start out working in the remote world, is there like some kind of source you could recommend that gives you an overview on different tools that are available out there, so that people can have just a rough cut and overview where to start and say, okay, you know, I mean, I start with Zoom versus Skype, right? There are tons of other tools, tons of other applications or reasons where you don't even know that there are tools out there you could use.
Yeah, I'm going to quickly share my screen, because sometimes I forget I even created this in my old company, but we created something called the Remote Starter Kit. I will share the link in a second. So it's remotestarterkit.com. But basically what we did was you can filter things. So this is all the things we recommend for anybody starting to know about remote teams. But then if you really want to focus only on tools, well, we call them apps. You just click on the, all apps. And then here you have only the tech side. If you only want tech for communication, then you click on the communication. If you want it for project management, organization. So we use these different filters. So I'm gonna share this with people. We also had an office. Some of these things might be a little bit outdated now, because this was created maybe 3 years ago, but most of it is still valid, I'd say. So that's the link. And otherwise, I mean, I would say, you know, the classic ones are usually Zoom and Slack, right? Then you still want a place to document things. So whether that's Dropbox or whether that's Google Suite, or I would aim to go for things in the cloud. Of course, people can talk about security issues and all of that. So that really depends on your IT and security team in your company, what they think. And a project management tool, I think, would be important. So yeah, and then I would say the missing piece of the puzzle that people are starting to discover is a visual collaboration tool like Mural. So something where you can all look at the same screen, the same thing, and then collaborate in real time and share your ideas visually. Any other questions? Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of what I saw was the visual aspect, being able to communicate. Because sometimes, you know, people learn differently or understand things differently. So if you can create a visual component, sometimes you can bridge the gap otherwise.
Yes, exactly. We actually have, I don't know where to find it now, but we have like a little, it's almost like a comic where you have two people who are thinking, like they're talking to each other and they say, yeah, we're thinking the same thing, just that one of them is like thinking like triangle and the other one's thinking a square. So, and then once they visualize it, they're like, oh, wait a second, we're not talking about the same thing at all. So it's quite,
Yes.
it's quite surprising to see what the visual aspect can bring out.
Will you be offering your slides?
Yes, absolutely. I will share this with, I mean, I can share it now. I just wanted to make sure that I lock everything down so nothing gets deleted. But I'll also share with Nora and Michael so they can send it to the participants who joined today, for sure. Any other questions? Let me see. I don't know if Nora or Michael, you had any questions or observations. I mean, this doesn't have to be just an ask me anything. This can be also like a conversation for sure.
Sure. Thank you. I do have a question. I think that whole remote work movement is still at its beginning in a way, right? It became kind of popular because it had to recently. But speaking of communication, I've noticed that we get lots of benefits also because of the fact that suddenly everybody is online, which is also I don't know. I do struggle a bit with the term remote work because it feels a bit like people are remote, but actually they aren't, right? They are like we are all online. It's so easy to get in touch with each other now, and at times a lot easier than at the office. So one of these examples that I wanted to bring up was a review meeting that from one of our teams that I've been to yesterday, actually, where in the past the reviews would be not very interactive. It's more like usually it's a demo, right? You show the product and get feedback and that sort of thing. But on that particular review meeting, the users actually got the chance to try it out because they were sort of all sitting in the same boat. They were all in the same meeting. They could just share the link, try out the application, and provide feedback based on their own experiences. So there is new possibilities, new options that we get because of that new setup, and I'm really looking forward to getting the benefits of this in the near future. And that would be my question. My question also. Where do you see benefits in terms of communication and collaboration beyond that? What we know from that typical work settings, let's say.
Yeah, I think so. One huge benefit is that I think what's the word I'm looking for? It makes communication more fair and more equal in a way. So if I'm having an online meeting with people like now, I can see a lot of faces, but it's hard for the person with the loudest voice to take over the conversation. They could try, but you know, if I have a facilitator, I always recommend having a facilitator for any kind of session, whether it's a meeting or a workshop or even a webinar or whatever, or a conversation like this. It's that, you know, that facilitator could easily just cut you out or even mute you if they wanted to. But I think that benefits a lot because there's a lot of people who are introverted, and I don't think we speak enough about people who are introverted in a work environment and how they feel at work. So when you have big groups, it's harder for I consider myself an introvert, but I'm like a fake extrovert. Like I can put myself forward because I know how to do it, but I would prefer not to. But for some people don't have that way of working. So I think, it makes it more easy for them to speak up and you don't have the physical presence of all these people like overwhelming you. I think another benefit is also you can get more done almost with, if you use time zones to your advantage, the differences, right? When I was working with people in Asia and I was in Europe, they would get things done in their morning. By the time I came online, they would like pass the baton on to me and communicate things. I would continue building on what they did. And it was almost like having ongoing communication, like 24/7, around the clock. But we were very good at using those time lags to our advantage, to almost get more done. And then our clients would be super inspired. And we even, we wrote blog posts. We had our own company playbook, which was out in the public for people to know this is how we work. And you can literally copy paste this process or this method and use it internally in your company. And so I find that that's a huge benefit as well, right? Like how to learn how to communicate without having to be dependent on somebody, and then just learn how to be more autonomous.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think the visual communication as well, as I think it was Jared mentioned before, I think that's something that we almost do more online than in person, because in a meeting room, like you just kind of be staring at each other's faces and maybe a flip chart or some whiteboard, but like you're actually if you know how to do it well, you can be even more engaged in an online meeting than in a real person one. Obviously I'm biased because I like working this way. I understand that it's hard for some people as well. I actually want you to know here, if there's anybody who wasn't used to working from home before and who now realizes that they appreciate it, or like, do you see some things that you find that are better now than in the office?
Yeah, sure. Some things have gotten better. I think the one thing that got better the most is focus, because of the workshop designs. But to be honest, I'm looking forward to meet people in person again.
Yeah. I can understand. The focus is a huge thing, I think, as well. Oliver, you made a very good point. You are less distracted when you're working at your own pace in your own environment of your choosing. That's what I love, is just, I don't have to listen to, I don't know, my colleagues or my boss's music because they have it on a speaker. Like I can just choose my own. So yeah, any other benefits that people want to share? Some surprising things, or even things you don't like, but
less commute time.
Mm-hmm.
More time with family, more time at home.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
That's true. I still have one struggle. I'm working in my home office anyway, even without Corona. What I find very difficult, I'm freelancing, so I take on a lot of new projects and I meet a lot of new clients. And for me, I had like one project now, which was with a big team, which I thought was really, really difficult, not meeting these people in person at least once before I start working on the project. That I thought was really hard, just to start with a conference call, especially because like I'm okay with Zoom, but my clients definitely aren't. They didn't even call in with a webcam, they call in with a phone. So I couldn't even see them. And I think that makes it really hard. There I'm still looking for some tricks I have to learn by myself to get that start better if you kick off.
Yeah, I'm interested to know, Petra, when you kick off a meeting, how do you kick it off? What do you start with?
We did a Zoom, or it wasn't Zoom, it was one of the other softwares meetings. But for some reason, the client thought I was already completely into the project, which I wasn't. So I tried them to first talk me through everything, but for some reason, they didn't really feel like. So I had to ask questions all the time, which was it didn't really work that well. And I know if you meet people in person, that's much easier.
Yeah, it can be easier. I think breaking the ice is easier in person. So I think I can maybe find a blog post or something for you, Petra, but I would recommend to start meetings with the agenda and without having that awkward moment of like, what are we doing? Should we all be here? Sometimes I'm like, okay, guys, this is the agenda. By the way, before the agenda, here's the guidelines. Everybody puts on their webcam. Everybody puts themselves on mute. These are the tools we're going to use. And sometimes I send an email before the calendar, before the event, or I put it in the calendar description, and I put all the necessary links that people need. You really prepare everything you can do in advance. Try to put it, like send it out to them so that people come feeling comfortable. And then I would start with a warm-up exercise or like an icebreaker question. I'm also gonna send a link of that. I did a post on online warm-ups and energizers that you can do. Some include mural, but not all of them. So I'll just put in the chat, online warm-ups and energizers. And those can be really fun. And then people kind of loosen up a little.
That's
and then it's not like we're gonna dive into work right now. It's like, here's the agenda, here's the guidelines for today. And then you really time things. I really should say people are gonna spend 10 minutes on that, 10 minutes on that. And then people feel like it's not just gonna be like a boring thing, you know?
That's a good plan, especially the preparation. I should do that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, the preparation is really important. And then the follow-up after.
Thanks.
No problem.
What helps me there is often I just explain that I need to see the people and to bring it from the perspective to say like, it will help me in being a better partner or a better communicator. Then often people are trying to do it, and it's more powerful than just to say like, please open your camera, or and showing a bit this vulnerability to say like, this is something what I need.
Yeah, and acting as a role model as well, right? So showing people rather than telling them what to do. I have some friends who debate and who say they don't think that bringing your authentic self to work, you know, they want the image to be like perfect, and they want their background to be a certain way. Luckily, Zoom allows us to upload these really funky virtual backgrounds, which is great. But I'm more of the opinion that, especially now with COVID-19, it's like, this is where I am. This is where we're all stuck right now. And I think it makes us a little bit more relatable. Like if I see, I don't know, I'm talking to you, Mika, and I see your cat coming, like my cat came in and out like 3 times while I've been talking. Like it's like, hey, you have a cat. Or even if your kid comes in and says hi, like our CEO, that happens to him all the time these days. And it makes it, I'm like, oh, okay, the CEO is also, you know, the father of 2 kids, and I can bond in a different way to the person. So I think it's, important to show that. So I just want to wrap up. I'm very conscious of time, that we've gone 2 minutes over, but I also don't know if I have a meeting right after. I should check. Yeah, I do have a meeting, but if there's any other questions, you're free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or Twitter. And thank you all for coming again.